Next up, we're going to talk about the for loop. Now, the for loop lets you cycle, like take a variable, for example, and cycle through a number of values, but its behavior is quite different to other programming languages. So if you've programmed in something else before, then this might come as a bit of a surprise. Okay, so let's suppose that I want to print out all the values of x from 1 to 10, for example. The way I can do it, in addition to using a while loop like we did previously, is I can write a for loop. So I can say that I want to go for the value of x starting at 1 and going all the way up to 10. And for going up to 10, I'm going to put 11 here. So 11 defines the upper bound, so to speak, the value where we stop. So we initialize x with a range of values from 1 to 10 inclusive. And 11 is kind of like the stopping value. I know it's a bit unintuitive to have the value here, but it's very useful, for example, when you get an array, and we'll talk about this later on, and you want to kind of get the terminal value. So this effectively executes the loop between the curly braces for values of x starting from 1 and ending at 10 exactly. So let me do a simple print line here. So I'm going to say x is equal to the value of x, and let's actually execute this. And you'll see that I have printouts from 1 to 10 inclusive. Of course, inside the for loop, just like inside the other loops up above, the break and continue statements also work just fine. So for example, I can say that if x has the value of 3, then what I can do is I can continue, and this would result in the value of 3 not being printed, as you can see here, because I'm basically resuming the execution of the loop and not calling everything that comes after, so not calling the print line for x equals to 3. And I can also break out of the loop. So for example, I can say that if for example x has the value of 8, then we can break out of the loop completely. And after I do this, we're not going to print values from 1 to 10, we're going to print values from 1 to 7, because at the value of 8, x is equal to 8, so we break out of the for loop and we execute whatever comes after the for loop. So this is how for loops look like in Rust. It's somewhat different because this thing is a range, and it's a very special kind of construct. So one thing that you can do with ranges is you can define a range going not from 1 to 11, for example, but let's suppose that you want a range from 30 to 40, and you also want the position inside that range. Because remember, even though we're going through values from 1 to 10, our position, if we were tracking the position of our iteration within this range, would be 0, 1, and 2, and so on. So they would start with 0. So how do you get both the position as well as the element? Well, you do it in this fashion. So you write a for loop once again, but here you take 2 values instead of 1. So here we just have the x going from one value to another. Here we're going to have the position as well as some value y, and we're going to take a range. Let's say a range from 30 to 40. So 30 to 41. And what we can do is we can call the enumerate function on this range. So the end result is that when we go through the values, we're not going just through the values from 30 to 40. We're going through pairs of values where the second value is 30 to 40. But the first value goes from 0 to 9, obviously, since we have 10 elements in the array. And we can, in the enumeration rather, we can print line this as follows. So the index of the element, then a colon, then the actual value of the element. So the index of the element, or the position of the element, is pos, and then the actual value is y. Okay, let's run this and see what happens. So as you can see, we get a printout where the first value is the position. So we start with the element at index 0, and we end up with the element at index 10, and we print out the the 11 values on the right.